Hey, welcome back. So, in this last video, we are going to talk about how to write up a literature review. In the last two videos, we talked about the steps in extracting information from articles and transferring into a literature review matrix. And from the matrix, we started to synthesize information into themes um, or trends or in terms of methodology or theoretical categories. So once we have done the synthesis, we have to start to write up the synthesis. And following is an example of a write up. And as you know, I've made up this write up because so far I only have 4 papers that I shared in the literature review matrix. But now I'm actually giving an example. If you have 10 studies, how would you actually do a write up of the systematic literature review? In here, I'm starting with an introduction. So, a total of 10 studies, blah blah blah, until statistical test subheadings is actually an introduction to the literature review. Here I am specifying what are the how many studies I have used, what was actually I am looking for, and what research database that I have used. And moving on from there, I'm actually explaining the themes that I found across the 10 articles, and they are sample and statistical analysis. And I'm actually guiding my readers with the second for the last sentence saying that read the following section to understand how I synthesize my articles. Okay, so my first theme is actually sample. And when I'm talking about sample, I have said that half of the study have reported using undergraduate student as their sample of the study. Meaning half of the papers that I found, all of them are samples, but half of them I have noticed that they are undergraduate and the other half is actually postgraduate students. And I further investigated, realized that from the half of the sample, 30% of the articles used psychology students as their samples. And then I said, okay, who are the papers? Who are the papers that have used psychology students as the samples? So that is why I have a citation here. Next, I'm talking about what is the reliability estimates for the undergraduate students and also for the postgraduate students. So what I'm trying to show here is once I'm talking about the sample, I'm starting from a broader view and I'm trying to narrow it down. So I said that I've got 10 papers. From 10 papers, half of them are undergraduates, another half is postgraduate, and within undergraduate I realized that 30% of them are using 30% of the samples that they have collected are from psychology. So at least you have an idea about that. Is interesting how these samples are being used in these articles. And you can then I'm reporting okay the reliability values that has been reported in the undergraduate student is between 0.6 and 0.8, but for the postgraduate students were higher. So what is the estimates? So it is 0.8 and 0.93. And who are the people reporting this range? So they are Tan and Stephen. So once I've done all these comparison differences within the context of sample, I need to do a closure, and that closure is what I'm doing here. I'm telling that findings from the articles clearly shows that the internal consistency of the items is viewed differently between under and postgraduate students. So what I'm trying to say is, based on all these discussions, my conclusion is the internal consistency or the reliability of the items are different for postgraduate and undergraduate. So it is whenever you start, because initially you start talking about the samples, and end of the day you have to come up with a conclusion. Next is we are talking about statistical tests. In this statistical test, we are talking about almost all articles assess reliability of the instrument. And I'm saying that 3 out of 10 articles use retest reliability, and the rest are using internal consistency. Again, initially I said for sample almost half use undergrad, almost other half use postgrad. Now here I'm saying that within statistical tests, within reliability, some are using a test retest type reliability, some are using internal consistency. So I'm trying to say like within reliability there are another 2 branches. Okay. Some of the study explain internal consistency across male and female student. So when we are talking about, now I said all are assessing reliability. Okay, within reliability some are using internal consistency, some are using retest reliability. When they are using internal consistency, they even further explore between male and females. So then from there you can say that how many males, how many females. Know what is the reliability estimates for females, what is the reliability estimates for the males. So from there you can also get an idea of how these reliability estimates function across gender. So these are all the synthesis, the critical analysis that happens from the articles that you have reviewed, from the matrix that you have collected. Clear? Besides, I have also talked about, lastly, additionally, the reliability estimates were good and satisfactory for the overall instrument. So this instrument has categories. Like if you notice, when we answered the statistical anxiety rating scale, there are 6 subscales within the instrument. So when you look at the overall instrument, it tells us that it is a reliable tool. But when you are looking at each subscale's reliability, one of them have reported to be very less. So what is actually, before I ask the question, if you notice, I have said what is actually the subscale that reported reliability estimate that is low. So I've said here anxiety towards test teacher subscale was reported to have less than 0.6 estimate across 6 papers. So what is actually missing in the statistical test paragraph? I'll give you 1 minute to think about it. If you have said that there is no citation in statistical test paragraphs, that means yes, you're good. You're observing it very well. Next is, I did not make any conclusion for the statistical test paragraph. So every time, so that too should be included. So the good example is the sample paragraph where I have started citation, putting the evidences, citing the papers, and also I make a conclusion at the end of the paragraph. But for statistical test, if you notice, I did not put any citation and I also did not do a conclusion statement. So that is pretty much like hanging, and it shows that where do you get all this information from? So when you are writing the synthesis, make sure that you include the citations. You have to tell where you get the information from. Next, whenever you start up an essay, you should always have a conclusion. So here you have an introduction, you have a body, and finally you need to have a conclusion, an overall conclusion of what these studies are trying to impose. So I believe that from all these 3 videos, you understand how systematic or a regular literature review process happens when you are writing a research proposal or a research project. Let me recap what we have learned from the video 1 to this example of write-up. Whenever you do a literature review, you have to start to search the documents. So when you do the search, so we talked about how to search articles. So once you search all these articles, you need to start to break them into meaningful information. So how do you break them? So you actually extract information that are same across these different studies. And so in order to see what is actually happening in the field and what is actually common across the papers or different across the papers, you need to organize all this extracted information into a single table of what we call as literature review matrix. This matrix. So when you put everything into a single page in a single table, it is much clearer for us to see the common themes or the trends or the similarities or differences across these papers. So from there you are able to synthesize, summarize, rather than you are just reporting study 1, study 2, study 3, study 4. You start to explain what is common between 1 and 2 and 1 and 3 and 3 and 4. So basically you are critically analyzing every article and synthesizing into meaningful chunk of information. And all these will turn out to be a good write-up. So always remember, when you are putting up a write-up, you need to have a introduction, you need to have a body. In the body you need to talk about the main points that you have gathered with evidences. And every time you finish up a paragraph, make sure there is a conclusion statement. Okay? And then finally, a conclusion for the entire write-up. So that is actually how to write a systematic literature review. I believe by now you should be able, you can start, I won't say you should be able to, but at least you have an idea how to start, how to extract, how to synthesize, and start writing up your literature review. So that is all I have for this video on literature review. I'll have some exercises for you to complete to test whether you have a good understanding of what we have just discussed on literature review. So, hope you have learned something out of this video, and all the best for the assignment. Thank you.